Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round by Kathlyn Kirkwood. A First Chapter Friday read aloud video with Amanda Zieba, an interview with Kathlyn Kirkwood. Hi, my name's Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week I'm going to be reading to you from Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round, a memoir, a story of the making of Martin Luther King Jr. Day by Kathlyn Kirkwood. This book is incredible. For dozens of different reasons. But the one I want to shout out to you right now is that it is a very unique combination of storytelling. It is a memoir, so that means it's nonfiction about a small portion of a person's life, and it's a novel in verse. And it includes primary documents right in along with the text. There are so many layers, so many applications, so many wonderful things about this story. I know it's going to be the perfect addition to your classroom library and your First Chapter Friday collection. In a little bit, I'm going to jump off screen and I'm going to show these pages to you because if I just read it to you, you'd be missing so much. So I want to show you the physical visual along with the words as well. Also, we're in for a real treat because after I read you the first few pages of this book, we're going to get a chance to talk with Kathlyn. And the passion and the energy and the enthusiasm that is present in this book is even perhaps more present in real life in our conversation. I'm just so grateful for her and her time and for sharing that with us. So make sure that you stick around afterwards. I'm going to read you the blurb so you know a little bit more about this story, and then we'll dive right in. This brilliant memoir in verse tells the moving story of how a nation learned to celebrate a hero. Through years of protest and petition, Kathlyn's story highlights the foot soldiers who fought to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday. Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round is a deeply moving middle grade memoir about what it means to be an everyday activist and foot soldier for racial justice, as Kathlyn, drawn to activism from childhood, recounts how she went from attending protests as a teenager to fighting for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday to become a national holiday as an adult. A blueprint for kids starting down their own path to civic awareness, it shows life beyond protests and details the sustained time, passion, and energy it takes to turn an idea into a law. Deftly weaving together monumental historical events with a heartfelt coming-of-age story and in-depth information on lawmaking, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around is a perfect, engaging example of how history can inform the present. How do you not want to read this book after that description? So we're not going to wait any longer. We're just going to dive right in to this story by my friend Kathlyn Kirkwood. 1968. I was just 17, a senior at Booker T. Washington High in Memphis, Tennessee. I was editor-in-chief of our yearbook, The Warrior, and I played clarinet in the marching band, Yay, for the Green and Gold. We love stepping high to the musical beats led by the crowd-pleasing majorettes and drum major, erect and tall right down Beale Street in the Cotton Makers' Jubilee Parade, the colored folks' celebration of the cotton industry. We couldn't go to the whites-only Cotton Carnival and see the king and queen's grand rival as they stepped off the royal barge on the Mississippi River, into their royal carriage followed by lavishly decorated, ornate floats pulled by colored men. While we stepped, ugly things were happening in America, especially in the Deep South. Jim Crow was the law. Racism, discrimination, and segregation of blacks and whites made a lot of black folks mad. I was just 17, but it made me mad too. One man was leading the fight for change, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Preacher, teacher, drum major for peace, he led the Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, the Birmingham campaign in Birmingham, Alabama, the Freedom Walk in Detroit, Michigan, and so many other demonstrations, prayer vigils, and nonviolent protests for freedom, for justice, for equality. Made a lot of white folks mad. Interspersed among some of those poems, you'd see some illustrations by Steffi Walthall and also some real-life photographs from Kathlyn's childhood. This one says Kathlyn and her brother Matt Carlos in band uniform getting ready to start stepping high. And the caption on this illustration says the Cotton Makers' Jubilee Parade was the black community's annual celebration of the cotton harvest on Beale Street, separate from the whites-only carnival celebrated on Main Street. These little pieces give us more of a context and an idea of what it was like to live during this time period. And they also give us some background information so we can better understand the historical context of the events and also just like what it was like for a regular, average, everyday person living during that time in that place. February 12th, 1968. The Negro Memphis sanitation workers went on strike. They were tired of being treated like boys instead of men. They did grueling work every day with no place to eat, no place to shower, no sick days, no vacation days, no health care, no pension plan for $1.70 an hour. Some still needed welfare just to live. The Negro sanitation workers were just bone tired. On this page, we'll also see some of the primary documents that I was telling you about before. Things, posters, information, flyers, documents that were circulated during this time period that helped spread the information and news about what was happening. So this one is saying, stop being a traitor to the Negroes' fight for freedom. The Community on the Move for Equality, a Memphis organization aimed at promoting social justice, called for boycotting the local newspapers because of their lack of support for the sanitation workers' strike and racist coverage of the Negro news in general. One day, as the men carried leaky, maggot-filled garbage tubs to the truck, a packer blade malfunctioned. Two men, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, were crushed to death. The Negro sanitation workers decided to fight these horrible, inhumane working conditions. They started marching on Main Street every day. They wanted good pay, job safety, and union recognition, just like the white sanitation workers. It seemed like nobody was listening, but Dr. King was. He halted his plans for the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C. that would demand Congress work to end poverty across America. Instead, he came to Memphis to support and lead a march for the sanitation workers. On this page, we have another illustration of the march and a caption that says the National Guard was called in during the sanitation workers' strike in Memphis. In this poem, we're going to see how historical and national events collide with an everyday person's real life. March 18th, 1968. At my daddy's barbershop, the men usually joked, laughed, shouted, and told tall tales. Not today. The only thing they talked about was why they were going to march, why they had to march. Everyone remembered the two men who died, the unfair pay, and how badly the Negro sanitation workers were treated. Flyers were everywhere. But my friends and I were young. We wanted to march too. Rushed home to see if I could. Stone-faced, Mama said, "Okay, but you have to stay close to Daddy." I squealed and ran to call my friends. Mama said yes. All night I tossed and turned, heart racing, thinking, imagining my first march. If you want to find out what happens next to Kathlyn and her friends and the march and the civil rights movement, you are absolutely going to want to pick up a copy of Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round. But now, let's head over and meet the author. All right, readers, here we are with my friend, Kathlyn Kirkwood, and we're going to talk about Ain't Nobody Gonna Turn Me Around. Kathlyn, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure, and I'm honored to be here and to see you again.
Yeah, it is good. It's been way too long. We're just going to jump right into the good stuff right away. And my first question for you is that this book is a very rare combination of genres and formats. So it is a memoir. It has nonfiction information in it, and it's also a novel in verse. And so I'm curious, how did you decide to use these genres and formats to tell this story?
Well, first of all, I need to tell you, before I started writing seriously for children, I was, I'm a retired college professor and part of the publisher parish, and a lot of my writing from a scholarly perspective was academia, and it was, as my teachers from Highlight said, boring. So I had been working for years and years trying to pull these pieces together. And I went to one of the Highlights classes, and I met one of my author instructors there. Her name was Deborah Hopkinson. And she was the one. I was explaining to her what I was doing and all my struggles and whatever. And so she was the one that had suggested, well, why don't you write it in verse? And it was kind of like a light bulb came on. It
Yeah.
was the best thing ever. And to be honest, I think verse is my new direction for all of my writings. So this is how it happened.
Yeah, sometimes a little nudge from another writer is so helpful. Um, it's also a really big project because there are so many different layers to this book. There are the poems, there are your personal experiences, there are photographs, there are like captions and illustrations, and like, how did you even begin figuring out how to put it all together? Like it, to me, it seems like a puzzle. How did that work?
Well, it was a puzzle, and I had, as I've told one of the my recent author visits with a group of students, this was the most difficult task that I've ever done in my entire life. Writing my dissertation was not this challenging. Uh, I was a newbie because it's my first book, I should say. And without the help of my agent, Jana Morishima, and the editors, I just don't know how I would have survived or made it, but it was a long time consuming process from getting permission to use. For example, in the book, I have two lines of "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around," which is a freedom song. And I had to get permission just to even have that in the book. All of those processes, any of the illustrations that were not mine, I had to try to find out who, had ownership, contact them, get permission, and all of those. It was time consuming. It was still also, I can say, exciting because I love research. So even though it was very difficult, and there were many nights I was in my office to 10, 11, 12 o'clock. Every time I discovered something wonderful, it was like, oh, it's worth all of the time and all of the energy. But I didn't understand the process until the contract was signed and we started moving forward. And every step, then there's something else you need to do. And it was a learning process for me as well. But it was challenging and exciting at the same time, but the most difficult thing ever.
Yeah. Well, and it is not a long book. There's so much goodness packed in such a tight little package, and that's amazing. It is worth it. I'm telling you that the extra energy and effort that you took,
Thank you.
it's a
Thank you.
wonderful, wonderful book. Okay, I'm looking at my questions next. Okay, what is one lesson that you hope readers will take away from your book?
Well, as I tell all of my young kiddos and young scholars that each and every one of us has a responsibility a civic and moral responsibility to help or aid in creating a world better than the one we are currently living in, for not only ourselves, but for the next generation. And I also talk about the fact that, everyone comes into their activism at some point in time. It's not a set time, it's not a set date. I was 17 when it happened. Something tragic had to happen in order for me to move, as I talk about in the author notes, Kathy's world, which is where I lived in for years, of a world of fantasy. And once Dr. King was assassinated, all of that changed for me. So that was the moment for me. But I tell the students that, your moment will come. You have a responsibility to use your gifts and talents to help create something better. And I also try to stress that you may not be interested in social justice activism, but you may want to, I tell them all the time, don't kill the bees when you see them in the summer. We need the bees because if we don't
Mhm.
have bees, we don't eat. So you may want to work with saving the bees. You may want to work with the rainforest. You may want to work with homelessness. You may want to get involved with gun control. Um, I recently had one of my former Sunday school students who was killed via, it's really hard, drunk driver. And I told that may be a new direction that I may be moving in, but there's so many issues, there's so many causes. I just advise them to find one, get busy, and make it work.
I love that. Find a cause, get busy, and make it work. We could do bumper stickers, Kathlyn, of that. I like that advice. One of my favorite parts about your book is the back matter. There's an amazing infographic. I'm gonna show it on screen, and I'll maybe put some screenshots of this um, up for people to see. But it says how a bill becomes a law, and then there's your author's notes that teaches us more about the story. And then there's a really great glossary that teaches us the vocabulary words that you use in there to just help take our understanding to a different level. How and why did you decide to include these pieces in the book?
Well, actually, I have to be honest, the idea was not mine. It was actually the editor. But
Mhm.
as time went on and we were running short on time, there was a thought, well, maybe we'll just eliminate the infographic altogether. And by then I was so sold on it and stuck on it. I said, no, actually, it has to be a part of it. But we did make some adjustments because the initial infographic was not satisfactory to me at all.
Mhm.
So we found this wonderful young graphic designer. Her name is very difficult, but it's in the author notes. Um, her name, I'll just say Miss Watley. She's very young, African American designer who we gave her our thoughts, the ideas, and what it was that we were hoping and that every student would be able to see themselves in the infographic. And this is really how the whole process, it started with an idea and we completed it with making many, many, many adjustments. And here we are today. And I think it's one of the really important aspects and most impactful aspects of the book.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments as a teacher is when you can edutain. So you can educate and you can entertain people. Like I can learn things while I'm also enjoying the story of this book. And so I love that you fought to include that because I really think that it is so
Mm.
important. And I think that it makes it easier for teachers to utilize this book in their school so that they can, maybe collaborate with a social studies classroom, or just, hey, shocker, social studies teachers, you guys could read a whole book. And
Yeah.
this would be a perfect one because it's so great and it's like I said before, it's short. Um, my last question is this. I know that you worked on this book for a really long time. We kind of alluded to it, but Kathlyn and I met at a Highlights Foundation workshop many, many years ago, and you were working on this book then. Um, and you persevered, like you stuck with it and you didn't give up. And so if there's anybody who's listening right now who's pursuing a goal or a task and they feel like they keep hitting roadblocks or it's taking longer than they want, what words of advice or wisdom would you pass along to them?
Well, I guess heed to the title of the book. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I try often to tell people it's not grammatically incorrect. It is a freedom song that was written by a freedom fighter, and it's perfect. And I was telling some of my young kiddos the other day that the title fits with every aspect of life. I went from writing prose to, and you saw me when I was there struggling, and then the light bulb came on with a wonderful suggestion, and it was still many, many years after that. And my suggestion is, if you have a dream, if you have a hope, and I'm talking to myself about my next project, to just keep plugging, keep pulling. I was just telling one young man that asked me, he was, I think, in fourth grade, about the writing. And I told him he's so young. I said, if you love writing, start writing, don't stop, keep moving forward. I said, I started, stopped, raised kids, did all those things. So for me, I came into this thing when I was late 60s, early 70s. And I said, but you have a whole lifetime to write many, many, many books. And I told them about Jacqueline Woodson, who's also one of my mentors, but also I would consider a friend. And Jacqueline talks about how she started writing at such a young age. And today I was telling him she's written over 40 plus books. So
Mhm.
what I would say is, if it's your passion, if you love it, just keep plugging no matter what, just keep writing. And yes, you're going to have some rejections. You know about rejections. I'm working on a chicken manuscript now. I love it, and I can't get anybody to say yes, and I don't know why. But I'm just continuing to never give up, never give in, and just keep plugging. And eventually, somebody's going to say yes. And as I tell my daughters all the time, you only need one. I don't need
Yep.
4 or 5. You only need one. So just keep writing and keep working and keep
Awesome.
revising.
Yes, that's important too. Thank you so much, Kathlyn, for your time and for this great interview and for such a great book. I'm so grateful for all of that. And readers, we're grateful that you had tuned in. And we'll see you again next time for another First Chapter Friday video. Happy
Okay,
reading.
thank you. Bye.
Mentioned it before, but I wanted to give you a quick sneak peek of this amazing back matter found in the book. One of my favorite parts about this book are these pieces. An author's note, a glossary, and an infographic help readers deepen their understanding and apply their newfound knowledge. If you want to keep reading Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday playlist, you guys. It's getting huge. I've got over 150 middle grade novels waiting for you there. Thanks so much for visiting my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you come back again for more First Chapter Friday videos, brain breaks, direct teaching videos, and more. I'll see you again next time. Happy reading.